Hi guys, welcome to Talking Teen Wolf. So I've been getting an increasing number of messages that begin something along the lines of, do you think they intended for something to happen, or they intended to do that? And my default answer is yes, because most things in television are intentional. But the thing is, what they're really asking is my interpretation what the original author intended? And my answer to that is, does it really matter? You see, the thing about TV is that it's a collective effort. We like to think of Jeff Davies as this all-powerful, godlike figure who's in charge of everything to do with Teen Wolf. And that's kind of not true. Sure, as showrunner and producer, he has a significant amount of power, but that only goes so far. Think of it as that game, Pass the Message, which is sometimes called Telephone or Chinese Whispers, but I'm pretty sure that's offensive. You know, the one where the kids all sit in a line or in a circle and they whisper a message down the line to see how much it changes by the time it gets to the last kid. Pretty much every time the message will have changed to a certain extent because people have misheard or misinterpreted, or if some little shit has just changed it entirely. Well, TV is like that. Think of Jeff as the original whisperer. He makes up the message and he passes it down the line, which is, I guess in this case, more of a web that kind of bleeds out from Jeff. By the time it reaches us, the audience, the message has been filtered through so many people that it's kind of a little bit murky. Each person that plays a part in making a television show has their own interpretation of the original message. And they push that interpretation onto the finished product. Okay, so it's a little more complicated than that because Jeff gets to check up on the message as it gets passed along to make sure that the original intention isn't completely lost. But there is one thing that he can't control, and that is the audience's interpretation. This is where we start to question whether or not the original author's intention actually matters. It's like if you say something that accidentally offends someone. It doesn't matter if you say afterwards that you didn't mean for it to be offensive, that person was still offended. It was offensive whether you intended it to be or not. I'm not gonna get all philosophical about the death of the author, but I just think it's important to understand the difference between intention and interpretation. Slash is probably one of the most obvious examples of the conflict between intent and interpretation, which is caused by the collective nature of television production. A group of people can all individually have the same intention, but when you put all of their pieces together, it ends up being interpreted in a completely unexpected way. I mean, that's just an inevitable part of art. Once you put it out there, there's no way to control how people are going to interpret it. One of the big points of television is to try and influence the audience towards your intended interpretation. But there's no way to force them to see it the way that you do. That's what's so wonderful about fandom, because it is all about interpretation, regardless of what the author's intent was. Like in the game of Pass the Message, the audience interpretation is always going to be a little bit different to the author's original intention. But the aim of the game is for the message to be as similar as possible when it reaches the end of the line. Ideally, with something like TV, with its ongoing nature and serial nature, there should be a certain amount of push-pull between intention and interpretation. The powers that be, need to take into account how the audience is interpreting their show, and the audience, needs to change their interpretation as the author's intent shifts. But here's the thing: neither side is obliged to change their opinion in order to fit with the other side's vision or the other side's interpretation. Creators are allowed to make whatever they want, and they are allowed to do whatever they want with the characters they have created. But in the same way, audiences are allowed to interpret it however they choose. The further apart intention and interpretation are, the less value either of them has. Think of Glee, nobody really cares what, Ryan, Ian, and Brad think about their characters or where they're going or something. But then on the other side, they don't really care what the audience thinks about their characters. What you really want is there to be an overlap. There's no way for both interpretation and intention to be exactly the same, but you want them to be an overlap. You want at least some of your message to get through to the audience in the way that you want it to. So, to answer all of your questions, yes, there is probably a deliberate intention behind most of the things that you see on Teen Wolf. But the question you need to ask is, whose intention was it? And does it really matter?